Aici se recrează senzația pe care o ai și ceea ce simți în momentul în care ești într-un elicopter. Bun venit la Escu Show! Do you get many Germans visiting here?
We have had a few Germans, yes, we do get them. That's the importance of that aircraft. It's the only one ever preserved of its type. It was in perfect condition at the end of the war. It was put in the Imperial War Museum on display, and then in the Second War, along comes a German bomber and drops a bomb on the place. And these are a big American aircraft. They were big and heavy. Americans tend to do things big. And that's what you're seeing here.
Yeah, so do the Russians.
Yes. It's a bit more complex.
So it's a 53 litres and it's got 2,000 horsepower.
Yeah. Well, in fact,
And you're talking, what, 1940, not 1939, and in 1945 it had 2,550 horsepower.
And later on it went up to 3,000. The trouble with it was great in straight line flight. But the Sea Fury was much more manoeuvrable. It was slower, but much more manoeuvrable. So the Sea Fury could actually shoot a MiG down if it was clever by
And they would
behind it.
essentially have the same engine. We're talking about the same Rolls-Royce engine.
That one had a similar engine to the one in the Vampire. It was one of the early centrifugal jet engines, which you can see up against the far wall there.
Has that Concorde ever crossed the Atlantic?
That Concorde went round the world.
Salutare și bun găsit, bun venit la Escu Show Podcast. Eu sunt Escu și astăzi ne aflăm într-o locație deosebită, undeva în sud-vestul Angliei, în Somerset, mai exact la Yeovilton. Suntem la Fleet Air Arm Museum și vreau să vă arăt ce am găsit pe aici, vreau să vă recomand câteva chestii și, bineînțeles, să vă spun de ce merită să vizitați. Hai! Hi!
Hi!
Who are you?
My name's Ian Winkle.
Ian, can you please give us a few reasons why people should come and visit the Fleet Air Arm Museum in Yeovilton?
Well, for a start, if you look around this area here, you have the very early origins of naval flight.
What year is that?
We're talking from 1910.
1910.
In the case of this aircraft, this is the aircraft they would have learned to fly on.
Is this the original one or
No,
it's a replica?
It's a replica.
Okay.
And then as you go further round, you see the sort of aircraft they would fight in during the First War.
Right.
So this is typical of the small, light aircraft that were used essentially all throughout the First War, both in the RAF and the Navy.
Okay.
In the Navy, they were all operating from floats. So originally we didn't have aircraft carriers other than converted ferries.
Right, so they would float as well as fly.
They were float planes. They would be dropped in the water to take off and picked up from the water. So that's what you're seeing here, large floats. In the case of the cabinet over there, you've got one of the very first torpedo carriers. 2 tons
So that was a serving aircraft at some point.
Not only was it a serving aircraft, it was the most famous aircraft from the First World War.
Wow.
It is the aircraft that discovered the Germans at the Battle of Jutland, reported their position at the start of the battle.
Do you get many Germans visiting here?
We have had a few Germans, yes, we do get them. That's the importance of that aircraft. It's the only one ever preserved of its type. It was in perfect condition at the end of the war. It was put in the Imperial War Museum on display, and then in the Second War, along comes a German bomber and drops a bomb on the place.
So, apart from obviously that exemplary there, we've got the Concorde, we've got the Humphrey from the Falkland War.
Humphrey from the Falklands.
So quite a few things that people would find here and wouldn't find anywhere else.
That's right. Our Concorde is the original prototype.
Okay.
So it's special in that case. It's shorter than all the later aircraft, by the way, by 10 metres.
10 metres?
10 metres
quite
shorter.
A bit.
We have a whole range of Second World War aircraft, including torpedo bombers, the Swordfish, etc. We've got a whole range of new early jet aircraft, which we exhibit in our aircraft carrier display.
Right.
So you can see the history of the development of aircraft from piston engine right the way through to jets. And then of course we have the Harrier, various Harrier displays, so you can actually see the prototype Harriers right the way through to the GR9, the very last version.
Has that Concorde ever crossed the Atlantic?
That Concorde went round the world.
Went around the world?
It did a world.
Would you say that's the
sales.
most impressive thing about this museum?
It is one of the biggest attractions we have. It brings more people in than most of the other aircraft here, I'm afraid.
Okay. But in your opinion, what's the most impressive thing that we've got in this museum that would be convincing somebody to just come over here and visit this museum from your point of view anyway?
Well, I think the most important thing is you have a display here of aircraft which are unique to the Navy. And that's the big difference between here and most other museums which are...
We're talking about Royal Navy, obviously.
This is Royal Navy. The only exception for that really is Concorde.
Okay.
Concorde is here because we don't own it. It belongs to the Science Museum in London. Okay. And we were the most handy place for it to live once its job was finished. So it came here way back in 1976.
How do you know so much? Where does this passion for knowledge and for...
I have been here now for about 5 or 6 years, so I've picked it up over time.
But what made you pick up so much?
I'm an engineer.
You're an engineer by trade?
And I'm actually a naval architect, so my speciality is ships.
Okay.
So I know more about ships than I know about aircraft, but I understand about aircraft because basically it's all engineering. And essentially what you're looking at here are very sophisticated bits of engineering.
Yes, probably the most sophisticated at the time anyway.
Well, they're the most sophisticated small bits of engineering.
Yeah,
a much
sure.
bigger bit.
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
the same principles apply. So
wow. So your passion is from basically just
engineering.
Engineering.
Yes. I started life on steam trains.
On steam trains? Wow.
I'm a train spotter.
Yeah, I don't blame you. They're quite fascinating, yes.
Fascinating about how aircraft and all of these things work. I still have difficulty understanding how an aircraft stays in the air. In theory, I understand what's happening, but understanding why it's doing that with a 400-ton aircraft. 400
tons, exactly.
It's quite difficult to think you can generate that much
just
lift.
by pushing the air down, yeah. Exactly. And you've been a volunteer here for 5 or 6 years?
About 5 years.
Well, thank you very much, Ian. Such a pleasure to know about the bits and the bobs. It's just where they've been placed, like, you know, the MIG and its competition, one next to each other. It's a little bit ironic, isn't it?
Well, because we have a display here all about the Korean War.
Yeah.
So that's what it's all about. This is all about the Korean War.
And this is what
this is the engine.
A Centaurus looks like.
This is one of the most powerful reciprocating engines ever built for aircraft.
Is it built in Bristol? Because it's called a Bristol Centaurus. It's basically built, what, 40, 50 miles just north of here?
That's right. It started life, the family started life with that blue engine over there.
Right.
And then evolved into these over the later years.
That's a monster.
It's interesting because this doesn't have conventional valves. It's a slide valve engine, a sleeve valve engine.
Right.
And it means it's a bit more compact.
So it's a 53 litres and it's got 2,000 horsepower.
Yeah. Well, in fact...
And you're talking, what, 1939? And in 1945, it had 2,550 horsepower.
And later on it went up to 3,000.
And it went up to 3,000.
So... And just think, one cylinder is bigger than your car engine. 3 litres of engine. 3 litres in each cylinder.
In each cylinder. Well, it needed a lot of power to lift these bad boys up.
I even have photographs of what they look like inside. This is one of my special interests, essentially.
Uh-huh.
That's what the cylinder looks like inside. There's your piston, and the yellow bit is the sleeve. And in this case, as the piston is up, the sleeve is right down.
Okay.
So it's closed off the two exhaust valves. And in this case, the piston is right down and the sleeve is right up. And it's just closed this valve. It's been open and it's just closed it. So again, that's part of the system. And there's your sleeve, that's what it looks like. At the bottom here, there's a crank. That crank makes the sleeve go up and down and rotate at the same time. So it's doing a very complicated orbital motion. And it's driven by a whole series of gear wheels just at the forward end of the engine here. Each one of those is driving one of the cranks that is driving the sleeve.
Wow.
If any one of those fails, that's it, finished. Engine failed.
Were they reliable as engines?
When they were originally designed, yes. Nowadays they are not, because we can't get the right oils for them.
Yeah, obviously, but back then they were
Yes.
very reliable compared to, say, a Rolls-Royce engine.
They were competitive with the Merlins. The difference is that this engine is much bulkier than the Merlin. A Merlin is long and thin. This one is short and fat, which means the fuselage has to be much fatter, which means you're dealing with a bigger, wider aircraft. You can see that in all of the ones here, which are all radial engines.
So that's why they've got such a thick nose.
Yes.
Basically.
Because they've got a big, wide radial engine, which is competitive with these, almost. These aircraft are still flown in America during the American air races at Reno.
Wow. So they do all the acrobatics and stuff.
And they do. They're extremely manoeuvrable aircraft.
Wow.
Which is how they survived against MiGs.
I suppose they are very, very heavy, nose heavy, aren't they?
Well, yeah, but you'll notice the wing is fairly far forward, so it's quite close to the engine.
So it's really well balanced, yeah.
It's a well-balanced aircraft. And it's got big, wide undercarriage, so it's a very easy aircraft to land from that point of view.
Yeah.
And you see the size of the propeller, just to give you some idea of the power. Bigger the propeller, the more blades, there's more power you'll develop.
Well, I suppose if they go up to 3,000 horsepower, you know, they've got a bit of kick.
They've got a big kick. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Bristol Brabazon.
No.
This was an aircraft they tried to develop after the war as a luxury transatlantic aircraft.
Right, okay.
They had 8 of these aircrafts.
8 of those.
Coupled together in
Big
pairs
boys.
on contra-rotating propellers. So they had
24,000 horsepower.
24,000 horsepower. It never took, well, it took off, but it never succeeded. It was too late it was the wrong era, because jets were now taking over.
Yes, yeah, there's no point in having a lot of propellers. And we've got an ejecting seat as well.
We've got an ejector seat. That's the history of the Bristol family of engines. That one you saw there was the one you see on the amphibious aircraft in Hall 1. So that's the aircraft then, the engine there, the Pegasus. And then here's the development of this engine here. It went through 2 phases.
So they just added cylinders
Yes, they started with a 7-cylinder, then they made
massive
two banks of 7 cylinders.
So they made 14.
And then they got to 18 with this one. And look at the date, 1938. So this was available at the beginning of the war, and never used.
In some countries, people were still living in huts in that time.
Absolutely.
And in 1938, the Brits, the plucky Brits, managed to come up with this.
So it's a fascinating piece of kit.
It absolutely is, yes. Thank you very much for your time. I wish you a happy new year and all the best.
Okay.
Thank you.
I hope to see some people here sometime. Cheers.
Fantastic. Da, fraților. Omul ăsta este o enciclopedie. Este un arhitect și inginer, adică nu vorbim de un fiește cine, dar faptul că se oferă ca voluntar în timpul lui liber să vină să discute despre ceva ce este pentru el foarte fascinant și de care el este foarte fascinat în sinea lui, pentru mine e o chestie care impune respect. Bravo lui. Pentru cei care sunteți pasionați de motoare, mai ales de motoare de avion, Fleet Air Arm Museum este cu siguranță un loc unde vrei să petreci câteva ore din viața ta. Și vestitul motor Rolls-Royce Merlin V12 de 790 de cai putere în 1934, adus 10 ani mai târziu la 2050 de cai putere. Poftim! Dacă cineva se întreba cum de Rolls-Royce este încă niște ani mai târziu, aproape 100 de ani mai târziu, lider de asta. Nu o să pretind că înțeleg ce se întâmplă aici. Dar în cazul în care asta constituie pasiunea voastră sau interesul vostru, cu siguranță merită o vizită. Ăsta este elicopterul în care am avut experiența. Datorită acestei bucăți de metal, așa mică cum o vedeți, a fost câștigat practic războiul din Falkland în 1982 de către Marea Britanie împotriva Argentinei de la momentul respectiv. Acolo în partea de sus, ceea ce se vede este practic recrearea experienței unui pasager pe un portavion. Vă dați seama că săptămâni sau poate luni de zile, în fiecare zi, priveliștea ta să fie albastru mării? Mă strânge în spate. Acolo avem o expoziție despre rolul femeilor în primul război mondial. Ei, uite că după aproape 3 ore petrecute aici în cele 4 hale pline de istorie la Fleet Air Arm Museum, aventura noastră a ajuns la final. Sper că v-a plăcut și sper că și voi, ca și noi, ați găsit din materialul ăsta multe motive să veniți să vizitați acest loc. Din punctul meu de vedere, merită doar pentru simplu fapt că aici se află un Concorde și atâtea chestii interesante. Eu vin pentru a 4-a oară în viața mea și încă sunt fascinat de cât e de frumos și cât e de interesant și cât este de educativ tot ce se vede pe aici. Pentru cei care așteaptă niște sfaturi practice, bineînțeles că o să las linkul în descrierea acestui videoclip și o să intrați acolo să vedeți unde este situat, care este locația și așa mai departe. Bineînțeles, avem locuri de parcare afară, avem facilități, avem toalete, avem cafenea, avem loc unde să luăm un prânz sau o cină, depinde acum de tipul de masă pe care îl necesitați în funcție de ora la care veți fi aici vizitând acest loc. Nu vă faceți niciun fel de griji în ceea ce privește prețul, pentru că este cât se poate de accesibil, iar dacă lucrezi în forțele armate sau în sănătate și poți să dovedești chestia asta, o să ai parte și de un discount. De asemenea, dacă ești localnic, ai parte de un discount de 20%, așa, din oficiu. Ce pot să vă mai spun este că ar fi bine să vă aduceți copiii, poate fi un once in a lifetime trip care să inspire pe cei mici și care, de ce nu, să îi ajute să-și croiască o carieră sau un drum în viață pe care poate de altfel, fără vizita de aici, nu l-ar fi croit. Eu am fost Escu, vă mulțumesc tare mult pentru susținere și sper că dacă v-a plăcut acest material să folosiți butoanele necesare, să lăsați un comentariu, să-l dați mai departe, să-l distribuiți și prietenii voștri din listă să îl vadă și ei la rândul lor. O săptămână frumoasă și până data viitoare, ca întotdeauna, sănătate și spor la bani, că de muncă suntem sătui. V-am pupat, pa, pa!